This week on Maximize Minimal Living, we start the ski season by heading back to Crabbe Mountain, and this time in the sun and the wind to try and explore the next set of trails. These intermediate runs are definitely way more challenging than at Poley, and if you aren't careful, you may end up biting off a little bit more than you can chew. So as previously mentioned, the wind was absolutely insane today, and so we're going to do this video mostly through narration. As per usual, when we get to Crabbe, the first thing you gotta do is head down the hill towards the chair, and normally that's a pretty easy trail to follow, but unfortunately because of the weather, they've been putting in so much work trying to get these trails up to snuff that the green trail was actually blocked off, and so you had no choice but to take the blue all the way down to the chair. The first thing we wanted to do is start off the day with kind of the easiest of what turned out to be the 3 blue trails to do. It is unfortunately the one that is most furthest away from the chair, and so like in most situations, you have to kind of travel a little bit of a ways once you get to the top of the mountain before you can actually get to the start of the run. This does give you a great opportunity though to kind of get those ski legs back under you before you go ahead and actually take on the mountain. And so we decided to start with the Upper Dave's Dream Trail, also known as the Trail 6, that leads into Dave's Dream, which is Trail 5. Not a ton to actually say about this trail. If you've seen the previous Crabbe video, this is actually one of the ones that we did do. So this is right off the side of actually where the bunny hill is, making it kind of the widest, most open, smallest gradient blue trail on the mountain, and it's a great progression for those people moving from green beginner trails up to the intermediate blue trails. As you can see the lodge in the background. You're kind of headed back towards where we started. Dave's trail is the one that we did just take in order to get all the way down to the chair. This trail does offer you a great opportunity to kind of practice your turns, making sure that you're comfortable with that nice wide S turns, taking up the whole bit of the trail. And so we just actually happened to run into a group of friends of ours who are also on that mountain, and so we decided to follow them down to the chair here and do a couple of runs together. And so the lower half of Dave's Dream, or the actual Dave's Dream trail, is similar to the upper half, but it is a little bit faster, and so the gradient is a little bit steeper, the trail is a little bit more narrow, but as I mentioned, it's pretty much the only way to get back down to the chair, and so it's kind of mandatory. It's a little bit of trial by fire for those people who are kind of new to it or who aren't really sure, but it doesn't take long before you actually kind of get the handle of it. And so next we headed over to Hume's Flume, which is the actual closest blue trail to the chair. The conditions were still looking great, and this is a really interesting contrast in terms of gradient compared to the runs that we just did. At the top, it's not nearly as steep, and you can see here we're kind of working our way nice and slowly, whether it's one person or a small group. You can really take your time and go from one edge to the other. After that first cornice though, it really does start to pick up, and so you can kind of see some of the gradients here are a lot steeper, and you start to pick up speed quite quickly. This is where it's really important to keep control. Do have to be careful because there were quite a few ice patches here at the time. Like I said, the weather has not been great so far this year, so that's kind of to be expected. The wind was quite strong. Here it actually almost completely stops me, which is pretty intense. One of the fun parts about this trail too is that you can see there's actually the speed flags on the side, which means this is the trail that they probably use for a lot of competitions or at least practice, which is really quite cool to see on such a small mountain and can be fun to give it a try. The bottom section of this trail is kind of a cross between the two. Similarly to the other ones, it's a little bit steeper, but it is a lot more open, and so you can kind of play around a little bit more. There's no dangers or risks. There's nothing in the trail that kind of gets in the way. It's just really a cool place to kind of, again, progress a little bit from those beginner runs. Once you do hit the bottom though, you are definitely going to want to put in a little speed check. Keep in mind there are different people coming in from different trails, and this is kind of where the junction is, and so we do want to be safe at all times. Lastly, we're going to look at kind of the middle set of blue trails, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. We started with the glades, which at the top, all of the black kind of junctions were closed off. And so this is not really surprising. There hasn't been enough snow to really make them safe, and so they just are off limits for now. As you move down, you're going to run into a small junction, one where the Glades continues off to the left, and on the right you'll have a second trail called the Little Brave. And so we started off with trail 9, and so we continued off to the right, and so this is almost like a little bit of a figure 8 style, or half a figure 8. It's through the woods, it's very scenic, very pretty. Again, you have some black trails that kind of shoot off from certain sides, so please keep in mind when you're looking at that, if you're not at that point to be able to take on those trails, please be careful. Otherwise, eventually that trail joins back up to the Glades Trail, trail 8, which in this case is what we're going to see next. Here you can kind of see it. The name is interesting. Glades normally means through the woods, and on this part of the trail you can actually have some of these bigger trees hanging out right in the middle of the run. This is a great reason why you want to be continuously checking your speed, making sure you stay in control, because it would not take very much in order to make a mistake and collide with one of these things, and that can be super bad and actually very dangerous for you. You can see the gradients on these hills are quite steep as well, and so like I said in the previous video, the blue runs here on Crabbe are definitely worse in terms of speed than the ones on Poley. This is where we tended to make a mistake, and so we actually got caught up doing the rest of the Glades, which is the black run. The incline definitely increased right here, and the obstructions are also much greater. You can actually see some of the grass kind of poking up through the snow here as I kind of ski around these trees. And so again, definitely one of these places you want to be in complete control. We actually weren't sure at the time whether or not this was black or blue, but looking back on it now, there really is no question. The obstruction, the trees, the gradient, even Curtis here comes a little bit unstuck, loses a little bit of control. He quickly gets it back though, which is super important as we head towards the bottom of this run. Especially when there are a lot of people around, we just want to be a little bit extra careful. Luckily for us, that main section there with those 3 or 4 big trees was the worst part. Everything from here on out is very kind of similar to a lot of the other stuff. The gradient has kind of decreased, and so it's not nearly as fast. The alternative though is taking kind of this additional blue run that allows you to kind of join back up with Hume's Flume. It's a very small trail right off to the side, right before you go over the corners for the black ones. You would think that because it's blue that this trail is a lot easier, but because it's so small and narrow, it actually is quite challenging. We had to do a lot of back and forth, almost like switchbacks when you're hiking, in order to kind of make sure that we controlled our speed, up until the point at least where you break back through the trees and you're back on that Hume's Flume with that speed train course set up. Curtis followed the rest of that back towards the chair, whereas I decided to take on the black diamond that runs underneath the actual chairlift. And so run 17 is called King's Horn, and it goes right underneath the chair. This gradient is quite steep, but it doesn't feel nearly as challenging as some of the other things on the mountain. I think this would be a really great progression for those people looking to move from blue to black. With that being said, the top of that trail was definitely closed, so maybe this is just a section you want to do rather than the whole thing. And with that, we had kind of explored the left side of Crabbe, the intermediate trails, and it was really exciting to get back out, get skiing again, get filming again, and I really look forward to doing a whole bunch more videos. And so thank you again so much for all the support and for watching. Hopefully this helped, and I'll see you on the slopes.